Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 115th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, thank you very much for listening. I have with me today longtime friend and colleague Mick Colageo. Mick, thanks for joining us, and please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
BostonHockeyNow.com, primarily at this time of the year. Occasional issues of the hockey news, and my Rink Wrap blog has been kind of sleeping, but it's coming back. I'm starting to kick the bed a little bit on that one. We got to get that thing going again. So yeah, we're going and we're here, and pal Pete Shepard should be calling sometime, and. So 115, we're running out of uniforms. I can't make these comparisons anymore to who that would be in uniform. 115. So.
Yeah, we've gone past the this is the ex-player Bruins player episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast because we're into the triple digits now. It'll be interesting though. Maybe someday with all these numbers being retired, they might have to go into the triple digits with the numbers. I hope that doesn't ever have to happen.
God. Please no. Hey, I'll tell you one thing. We could do like the great regular seasons of all time. And for this one, this will be the bitter one of the 1978-79 Montreal Canadiens, who had 115 points, one shy of the top of first overall New York Islanders, who had 116. And those were the Canadiens who miraculously came back to topple the Bruins on the infamous too many men in the ice game, the evil May 10th, as opposed to the wonderful May 10th of 1970.
That's right. A date in infamy for Boston Bruins fans at some points. We're going to go through some questions today. Bruins fans questions. We'll tackle a couple of recent topics with the Bruins. It should be a great episode where you're going to, there'll be some Jeremy Swayman talk, no doubt about it, but we'll also answer some different Bruins questions. But first, I just want to thank really quick our sponsors. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's really fun and simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. Game Time is awesome. The best place to go if you want Red Sox tickets, if you want to go to Fenway. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with the Red Sox at Fenway with Game Time in the summer. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Mick, we have some interesting stuff here. Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway signed offer sheets with the St. Louis Blues, a couple of Edmonton Oilers players. We wait every summer and always say, oh, nobody's going to sign anybody to an offer sheet. It's not going to happen. And like every once in a while it happens. And, very rarely, though, does it actually work out and they sign with the new team. This, though, is an interesting one. The Oilers aren't exactly flush in cap space, and the Blues clearly targeted players where they're not going to have to give up a ton as far as draft pick compensation for the contracts that they signed them to. In fact, I think the Blues had to make a trade in order to recoup one of their draft picks in order to actually sign one of the players to this offer sheet, which is interesting because teams have to use their own actual draft picks as compensation if they sign the player, a restricted free agent, to an offer sheet. Your thoughts just on this, and if it relates in any way whatsoever to Jeremy Swayman as an RFA who's sitting out there who could be offer sheeted by somebody else. Granted, much bigger contract it would have to be on an offer sheet, much bigger compensation package. And, with all these players, they have to actually agree to sign the offer sheet before it gets done and gets tendered and the whole process starts. So, Swayman would have to agree to, upset the apple cart and really, play cutthroat here by signing an offer sheet with somebody else if he wasn't satisfied with the way negotiations were going with the Bruins. But your thoughts in general on these two offer sheet contracts and if it relates to the Bruins in any way.
Well, it certainly has about 70,000 hockey fans, including myself, scurrying over to Puckpedia to see which teams have the amount of cap space it would probably take Swayman to sign an offer sheet.
Yeah.
And what their goaltending situation is. So my first one I brought up is the Utah Hockey Club, UHC. Karol Vejmelka has a one more year at $2.725 million, and Connor Ingram, also in his late 20s, is got 2 years at $1.950. They have almost $10 million in cap space. They're going to try to make a splash where they are. To me, why wouldn't Billy Armstrong do this?
Yeah.
Now granted, he doesn't get like the divisional, it isn't like a divisional leverage sort of a thing here. That's not part of this, but, or even conference. But as I recall, he was fired by the Bruins when he was in Providence.
Yeah.
So they got rid of 2 guys over there, long history, no choice of their own. Rob Murray, who went on to coach the Alaska Aces, the outposts of professional hockey.
Yep.
And Army, who was famously Peter Laviolette's assistant coach when they won the Calder Cup back in '99. So I look at this and say, who the hell knows, man?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and like that you paint an interesting scenario because they would be able to do it. Clearly, they could use a goalie like Swayman, and it would be a big splash for them. But from Swayman's end of it, is he going to roll the dice with potentially being stuck with the Arizona / Utah Hockey Club, which, it's I'm not sure how many years it's going to take for them to really like turn into anything whatsoever competitively, and really, that's rolling the dice. Like, Swayman's an outdoorsy guy. Obviously, being in Utah would be a great place to be. It would be exciting to be with a first-year team. Like, there would be energy there with that. But, like, let's face it, this is still the Arizona Coyotes that have moved to Utah. So this is...
That said, Army has a lot of respect around the league for what he's done with that team in terms of stockpiling the young end of the franchise, and is positioning it to similarly almost to an expansion club. They're a little like that right now.
True, to a point, but like, I think players are still going to view that as Arizona, even though it's new ownership, even though they've moved to a different place. I think they're going to still view it in that light until it's like proven to have been changed for a few years. And for a guy like Swayman to leave a Stanley Cup contender where he's built up like a reputation and a history with, to go to a team like that, that would be a bold move, because I feel like the only reason he would do that and his camp would do that is to force the Bruins' hand and try to get them to, get off the pot and sign them to a contract. And they wouldn't actually want to go there. It would be more like playing, bluffing and playing poker with the Bruins if they were to sign an offer sheet. But like, that's certainly, if things go on long enough and go into training camp, and I don't even know if you can do an offer sheet in training camp, if it has to come over the summer or not. That's an interesting. I suppose you could if he's still not signed. But that whole scenario is really interesting with a team that has cap space and a team that could, cannonball into the pool and really screw up the Bruins a little bit. I don't see him. I just don't see him as a player that's going to assign an offer sheet with somebody else. I feel like in some ways there was a good faith thing going on when they both declined arbitration. And this, I think, would go against that in a big way if he ended up signing an offer sheet. I feel like both sides want to get it done, and there's good faith to want to get it done, even if they're not agreeing on the money and the term and like the details of the contract right now. And I feel like going the offer sheet route would really destroy any like good faith participation that that Swayman's side would have, even though it's within their rights to do it. He's an RFA. It's a tool that they could use and a team can use, and all that stuff. I don't see him as the type of person that's going to let that happen. At the end of the day, he wouldn't press the red button and sign that offer sheet to go to Utah to force the Bruins to sign him to a contract.
I'm not so sure that he is either, but I look at the reality of this happening, and players are then suddenly talking to their families, talking to their agent, talking to peers, and I think that at that point it becomes a live wire, because then the question's a different question. It takes on a new life on its own. Of this is your chance to do something that's going to change everything. The Bruins have been sitting around here. You have no guarantee that if you say no, that they're going to come to the table and meet you where you need to be met here. They haven't given you that indication. It's gone this long. We're only weeks away from training camp. What about Yzerman? I mean, he doesn't have Vasilevsky in Detroit. So, Ville Husso is almost making $5 million, but he's got one more year. They got like $17 million in space. They've been kind of quiet. I mean, that one it's makes one piece of the equation that would really, Moritz Seider is RFA, so obviously he's got to get that done too, but I think 17 is enough to get it done. So, I'm looking at him and thinking he wants to probably replicate what he built in Tampa, and Swayman could be his Vasilevsky.
Yes, that one I think it makes a little more sense as far as being a viable option for Swayman, being something that would be tempting at least. Certainly, they've built up a very good young core, and they're continuing to build, and you have faith in Yzerman that he's going to get them, where they need to go in the next year or two, because they're at a sort of crossroads point where he's been there for a few years, and it's time for them to, really make that big move into breaking into the Eastern Conference playoff party and breaking into that Atlantic Division group that's a playoff contender. And the history is there, obviously, Hockey Town with the Red Wings. So that one's interesting. That one's really interesting. And it just speaks to, like, that's an avenue. Like, it makes it a little more real when you see the Blues pick off a couple of talented young former first-round picks that the Oilers had, who were kind of stuck in Edmonton where they weren't maybe getting the opportunities that they wanted to get, or they would have gotten on a different team. And they're obviously talented enough as former first-round picks, and they don't have a ton of cap space to keep these players. Like, it's going to really, it's going to give them trouble to keep all these players and keep the core group that they have and keep everything together. So it's kind of like the perfect storm where an offer sheet might happen, given all those things involved.
I think Detroit's really pretty set up for this.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. The good thing about the Bruins, though, right, is whatever off sheet number they're going to throw out there to sign Swayman, the Bruins are going to be able to match it. I'm sure they will. The end line of this story would be that they're just going to match whatever he gets and keep him.
Well, that's what they'll say if forced to comment. That having been said, how high do we think? How high do we think Yzerman would go? Anybody would go.
You'd have to severely overpay to get to a point where you could get the player. And now you're talking about, what is it, 9-10 million that you would sign him to, and you're giving up, like, what is it?
Or 11 maybe.
4 first round picks for compensation. Like, that's a lot. Like, whatever the compensation is when it gets to that level is crazy. Well, like, it would be hard for me to believe.
Yeah, there is a we have the I had it handy. Should have had it up early. The whole package thing of,
but it's
how high do you have to go in order to get to the point where it's 100 straight first rounders? You know, I think you get up into 5. You get up into the 7-8 digits there. I think when you when you get there, but there are some people that are adamant that hey, if Draisaitl is going to be worth 12 or 13 million to the Edmonton Oilers, and he's not even their best player, then how is it that the goaltender, who a fair amount of people still, ascend to the theory that the goaltender is the most important player on your team.
Yep.
I'm more your number one defenseman.
Yep.
Pending the makeup of your club. But it's that's I don't consider it outrageous. I see a constellation in the night sky here. I think the stars are aligned. It's a question of a decision.
All right, here we go. Hold on. I'm going to pull up the offer sheet compensation. 9 million to 11 million is 2 firsts, a second, and third round picks. So above 11.4 is 4 first round picks. So he would definitely, I think,
11.3.
Yeah. He would. I think he would definitely. If somebody was going to sign him to an offer sheet where potentially the Bruins wouldn't match it, it'd have to be in the 9 to 11 and a half.
It would be
range.
11. It would be short of 11.4. It'd be between 11 and 11.4. And then.
So is Detroit or any team willing to give up 2 seconds, 2 firsts, a second, and a third round pick for Jeremy Swayman and give him that kind of money? I don't know.
Okay, but now let's look at. It's got to be a good team too, though, so that it doesn't hurt that much to trade those positions. So it's got to be okay. So let's just get away from Detroit for a second here and see if there's a team that's in the playoffs.
That kind of a compensation package would make more sense if it was Utah. Like Utah would probably be willing to give all that up because they have a talented young core. But they're missing the goalie. Like that makes sense for them to be willing to give up that package. If you're Detroit, although Detroit's got a good young core too,
I think I feel like they're more established.
That's a lot to give up for a goaltender when goaltenders don't have traditionally trade value wise the highest trade value out there in the market. And essentially, you got to view that kind of as a trade if you're giving up all these draft picks in order to sign the player.
And here's the other thing: if you're the Red Wings, you say, okay, we missed the playoffs last year. However, we didn't miss it by that much. We're a pretty decent team.
Right.
We're pretty much established team. We even got another year of Patrick Kane coming. And what do we do to get over to make ourselves a playoff team? Now, if they push themselves into the conversation by having the linchpin goaltender, and that's the move that changes the trajectory of their club, or at least it's standing as a playoff team as opposed to not a playoff team, and kind of suddenly changes the expectations by 3 rungs on the ladder, then on a 10-rung ladder, then maybe it is feasible for I don't know if the Utah can think similarly about their club as the Red Wings can, but I feel like the Red Wings are lined up for this and have the cap space to make an outrageous kind of play here, and earn some stern words from Brian Burke in the process.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Right. Challenge somebody to a barn fight when it's all said and done. I mean, the whole thing's interesting. I don't see it happening because at the end of the day, like I said, the player has to agree to it. It's not like you just send them an offer sheet and it's done. That player has to sign the offer sheet. The player has to be interested in potentially going elsewhere and, really go the full length of pressuring their own team or being willing to go somewhere else. I don't know that Swayman is willing to do that. It'll be interesting, though, if that becomes a reality the closer they get to training camp and as the next couple of weeks go on, if there's not a significant progress or anything gets done. I do think in general, though, these offer sheets make much more sense from what St. Louis did, which is you take a sort of middle tier player. It's a $2, $3, $4 million offer where you're giving up second round picks, you're giving up third round picks. The compensation's not really that punitive, and the money's not that punitive, but you're getting a good young player that's a former first round pick that just didn't have a concrete spot or hadn't quite established themselves on a talented Edmonton team and was kind of stuck amongst their really good depth. Those seem to be the ideal offer sheet RFA kind of targets, not the franchise players, the guys making a ton of money that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg in terms of draft pick assets to take them away. But it'll be interesting. I think it's something very interesting to talk about and think about. And the Detroit one, it does. If you're a Bruins fan, it should scare you a little bit to think about a division rival coming in and potentially wooing Swayman away by just like offering him, the sun and the moon and the stars, and being willing to do that if they view the goalie as like the last link to them, turn into a contender and a playoff team. That should be a little scary for Bruins fans for sure. One thing that's not scary though, Mick, is Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. Right now, you can take advantage of Caitlin Clark racking up triple doubles and dropping dimes in every game she's playing, or hop on the Jarren Duran train, that is when he comes back from suspension, as he's posting big offensive numbers in just about every statistical category. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, then Prize Picks has you covered, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. There's plenty at Prize Picks to get bang for your hard-earned buck. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. How do you like that? If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Still, and this is a question from Julian Beckett 75 on X Twitter. Still shocked you don't see more offer sheets. I get why, but you'd think more GMs would be a bit more bold. And maybe Mick, this is a sign that we're going to start seeing GMs do this a little more often after seeing the GM in St. Louis get a little bold here. I mean, all you need is this to happen and work out a few times in the right situations for, I think, the GMs to start, Doug Armstrong and all the other GMs out there to start doing this a little bit more if they feel like they're in a space to really improve their team.
Another team that I've kind of thought about is the Carolina Hurricanes. They don't have quite the same number of cap space. They're not that far off. They could make a move to make the cap space, but they have history. They got Jesperi Kotkaniemi, the 24-year-old centerman, who's playing for them at $4.82 per on a long-term deal, UFA in 2030 from the Montreal Canadiens, and who elected to take the compensation. And so this is in interesting times where it concerns us. It almost makes you wonder too, because if you go back to the 80s and the Scott Stevens, Brendan Shanahan situation there, and I'm trying to remember which was the chicken and which was the egg, but the Blues and the Devils had a situation where I think it might have been the Devils who signed Scott Stevens, who was RFA, and back then you did not have the structured draft pick compensation rules. You had an arbiter determine what the flesh and blood compensation should be, and the Blues were awarded Brendan Shanahan as compensation, which was in reality a very fair 1-for-1 hockey trade, not one that the Devils apparently chose, but it's worked out famously for them, better for them than it did for St. Louis. Shanahan won a Stanley Cup in Detroit, or a couple or three. This was and even passed through Hartford on his way there. So Shanahan had a traveled career, even though he was quite the power forward, drawing comparisons to players like Cam Neely and other Keith Kachuk, big physical forwards who are great around the net. And Stevens, we know what his legacy is as just a middle of the ice assassin, with the intercepting the cutting forward, bringing the puck through the middle, boom, see you, bye. And the Devils built around him and Scott Niedermayer and Martin Brodeur and either Ken Danico or Brian Rafalski, and won the Stanley Cup 3 times. And we're in another Game 7 for it. So they, one of the great teams modeled after the 70s Montreal Canadiens.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next question. Is the Swayman contract holding up the Bruins from signing any $1 million guys to fill out the roster, or are the Bruins going to give the rookies a shot? And that's from RNDC2 in the Boston Sports Journal Q&A that I do. I don't think this is holding up anything, the Swayman contract at this point. I think they have all the pieces in place, and anything else they're going to add would be training camp invites to compete along with the rookies. But we talked about this a little bit last week, Mick. I really feel like they want Fabian Lysell to win this job. They want him to get that spot, to make the team and potentially be a top 6 guy, and see that, investment with a first round pick pay off this year as the spot opens with Jake DeBrusk leaving in free agency.
Yeah, and I also wonder if this question missed out on some press releases, because they did sign some guys. They brought in Max Jones. They brought in Kostelic. They brought back Lettieri in the Lauco trade, who is a goal scorer, a playmaker.
Tough, Viel. There's a bunch of guys they brought in.
So
Viel's an interesting one, I think, where he's actually gotten time in the NHL with San Jose as a fighter, as a tough guy, as a fourth line, like intimidator type player. He dropped the gloves with Zdeno Chara a couple years ago when he was in San Jose. Like, it takes a certain guy to be willing to do that, that's an interesting piece that is probably going to be in Providence, but will be an option for them if they need the extra toughness, if they feel like they need a guy that, can come up and bang bodies and potentially, have the back of some of the star players if it goes that way against certain teams, or if there's a time of year where you need an element like that and a player like that. I after watching him and talking to people about him, I think he's a player that could end up in Boston for, some cups of coffee this year.
Yep, I agree. And there's other guys in that group. So it isn't like the Bruins didn't go out and do this already. They've already gotten a collection of hurdles there. I do agree with you, however, that and I am intrigued to take a look at the unsigned, the great vast sea of UFAs who are still hanging around out there.
Kyler Yamamoto, Blake Wheeler, guys like that are out there, haven't retired, or are younger guys that haven't signed with a team that could be options for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really do wonder. I really don't want to see Max Pacioretty in Bruins camp on a tryout.
Pacioretty, yep, that's another one.
But I look at some of these guys and say, wow, there's a lot of unsigned guys out there who aren't going anywhere right now. Some of obviously retiring, like Joe Pavelski. Hoffman, I know I'm not a fan. I feel like although watch him be the guy, but I do feel like there's some of these guys who have a history for being able to put the biscuit in the basket, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see somebody come into camp on a Heinen scenario, but maybe with a little less of a, hey, let's make this work kind of a thing and get this guy down to where he was.
It would be more like the Alex Chasen invite last year too.
Yeah.
He was in training camp too. Heinen beat him out for the spot. But that, that's a guy the Bruins had always kind of been watching from afar over the years, and finally got a chance to at least bring him in and have him be a part of a camp. Like, you're totally right. They're mostly aging guys, guys coming back from injuries, guys that are probably a year or two away from retirement. Those would be the potentially available guys, but that's why they're in the spot that they're in, looking for training camp invites. James Van Riemsdyk is in that situation as well.
He and Shattenkirk are 35.
Yep.
Hoffman's 34.
I think that you will see at least one, maybe two training camp invites of players like that. Certainly, it would
maybe Okposo.
Yeah, it would help up. I think he's going to retire though, isn't he? After winning
No,
the
I
cup.
think you're right. I think you're right. There was
Yeah.
talk about that.
Um, so I think that there will be a couple of guys like that will certainly be invited to camp and will compete. And there's, why not? There's no risk there. It's high reward potentially with no risk. And you're not signing the player to a contract. You might not even have to sign the player to a contract to start the year. Like Danton Heinen didn't get signed until, mid October, I think it was. He was definitely in limbo for a few weeks. I remember the year Jay Pandolfo made the Bruins out of camp on a training camp invite. And it was, I think, at least a month, maybe longer than that before he actually signed a contract with the Bruins for that last year that he was in the league as well. So something like that is definitely realistic. But like, I think at this point, the last guy that got signed to kind of a close to $1 million contract was Daniel Sprong in Vancouver. He was sort of at the top of that list of players that were available and weren't signed in the first flurry.
And I heard a little weeping and gnashing of teeth on social media about that. Like, why didn't the Bruins get this guy? I'm thinking, like, wait a second, let's let this play out. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that you're going to put all your pegs into perfectly fit holes and say, here's our hockey team, and it's going to go from October to June. It never works out that way. So why would you try to pretend that you have this answer about a guy like that when, I mean, I look at this and I think, okay, what is the Sweeney history? It's guys who have flexibility, who can move around in a lineup. And the guy I see there, that 26-year-old right shot center, Michael McLeod. So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some interest there. I don't tend to think it would be a guy like Silverberg. I tend to think it's going to be more.
Silverberg is retired too.
Yeah, is he? Okay. I think Cogliano is as well. So, yeah. I also, we got to remember any of these players can't be looked at in a vacuum. They have to fit the profile. The Bruins want to be faster they want everybody to be a capable F1. And you got to be able to get there. If you happen to be big, good.
Yeah.
But that Don Sweeney insists that was the icing on the cake of getting faster, fiercer forecheckers and, first to the puck.
If it were me, Yamamoto would be the guy at the top of the list because he's a former first-round pick. He's had some decent offensive numbers in the league. I think he is fairly flexible as far as where he plays, and he's youngish. So
he's a right shot too, and they don't have enough of those.
So I think if that's the guy, I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be looking for to bring in as a camp invite, and I think he makes a ton of sense for those reasons. But it'll be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out, and I do fully expect that they're going to have at least one, maybe two of those guys in training camp, since there's at least one spot that's fairly well established up for competition on that NHL pick, and that's what brings those guys too, right? Is if they hear or see that there might be a job opening there, especially on a team like the Bruins, that's going to bring somebody on an invite because they think they're going to have maybe a realistic shot at winning it instead of going somewhere else where there's not going to be any room at the inn. So that whole thing, it should be playing out right as training camp is starting next month.
Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time, the Red Sox, Fenway Park. Jarren Duran putting on a show at the MLB All-Star Game. So you may want to dig into your pocket and actually spend some money on some Red Sox tickets based on Jarren Duran and the season he's having. This is one of those seasons where I think you're going to want to watch because he's in the middle of putting something together pretty special. You're going to say you were in the stands and you saw Jarren Duran do something crazy when you were actually watching one of the games at Fenway. So go to Game Time. Last minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Zone deals, save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of getting Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Next question. Haggs, I like the additions this offseason, but where's the vision for building this team? Where will a star forward center come from? Lindholm is not a star and still has no wingers to write home about after Pasta. I really think Pasta is the only winger that he needs. I think Pavel Zacha is a very good player, so I think that part is kind of off base. But on D, it seems too many big contracts for a low ride to break into the top 4 or top 2 minutes, even over a few years. The whole roster building doesn't seem to mesh. Am I missing something? And that's from Marco 0703 on Boston Sports Journal. Mick, your thoughts?
I'll take low ride first. The Bruins want McAvoy to have a physical option to his left. That doesn't mean that every single shift of the season it's going to be Zadorov. McAvoy is going to play more minutes than Zadorov, probably by more than 5. So on average. So, and if that's the case, then Lori is the natural alternative to that, as it's fairly certain that Carlo and Lindholm will be a staple pairing. That, unless something goes terribly wrong or there's an injury, then I don't think we're going to see that move very much. So we really have a very solid 1-2-3 progression on the right shots with McAvoy, Carlo, and Andrew Peak. On the left side, Lindholm is your number one on the depth chart, but he'll play on the Carlo pairing because of what he brings to the table, puck-moving ability, fourth man on the attack. So Zadorov gives the Bruins an option to get McAvoy, get the pressure off of McAvoy from the forecheckers who would do him harm on the retrievals, and also allow him to focus less on the next hit he makes, the next hit he takes, and play the game and grow his offensive abilities and be more comfortable out there and less distracted. Not that he isn't tough, not that he can't handle it, not that he won't willingly engage it, but it's just the next period in his career would be best with a guy who can really run some interference and be mean out there and scare some people. That does, to me, all that does is make Lowry's situation better because he'll get his minutes, he'll get his shifts. He'll probably play 15 minutes or so, maybe 17, 18 on some nights. They could go with a very balanced night and give Hampus some easier nights, and go with some balanced night and keep everybody fresh. This is not a situation that necessarily makes him sit at the kids' table. I think that this is a situation that gives the Bruins more options, and it won't be exclusive. It won't be the one and only thing we ever do. Monty's not like that anyway. So, but I think that's how I'm looking at that more. As for Elias Lindholm goes, is he a flashy star, razzle-dazzle guy who's going to be a point-per-game player? Probably not. But it gives the Bruins kind of a European version of Charlie Coyle, where you're going to have a guy who's one of the best players on the ice, no matter where the puck is and no matter which team has it in any zone. He's going to give you the solid top 6 glue. If anybody noticed the playoff line for him? It wasn't bad. In the most impactful hockey of the season, he played well. He produced. And so the idea that he doesn't have I'm sounding like President Biden here, the very idea. So I think that the Lindholm effect is being vastly underrated because he's not a sexy signing, but it's going to be a tremendously meaningful one because it's going to drop the dominoes and make everybody better in lots of ways. Everybody just got better. Trust me.
Well, when he says, and no wingers to write home about after Pasta, Brad Marchand's an outstanding winger if he ever ends up playing with him. So there is somebody else to write home about after Pasta. But, if Lindholm is projected to play with Pasternak, and that's who he's most likely going to play with most of the year, that's really all you need. I don't care about what you write home about after Pasternak if he's playing with Pasternak most of the time, and that's who he's going to be feeding and teaming up with and building chemistry with. And you already add Zacha, who has good chemistry with Pasternak, who is going to be able to support Lindholm because he's also a center and has that mindset and is a really good two-way player. You put the three of them together, and I think that's going to be dynamic. I think it's going to be a really good line. His best season came with Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau on his two wings in Calgary. where he had over 40 goals, over 80 points, was a point per game player, was a really, accomplished scorer that year. I don't think he's going to have that kind of season, but I think his numbers are going to go up based on playing with Zacha and Pastrnak on a regular basis. And I think you're going to see the production be outstanding for him, in addition to your point, him playing sort of like a European version of Patrice Bergeron out there as a good two-way center, 200-foot player that, does the right things, is a smart player, and is going to be one of the best players on the ice every time he's out there. So, like, I have no issues with the way things are built right now. I think if Lindholm is playing with Pastrnak and Coyle slides down to the second center spot with Brad Marchand, I think that's fine. I think they're in a good place with their centers now. And then you have competition for the third line center spot with a lot of different guys, whether it's Patra, whether it's Geeky, whether it's Trent Frederick, there's go down the list. There's a bunch of guys. There's probably 4 or 5 guys. Merkulov, maybe even he, plays his way into the competition there. But I think you're going to have a lot of good qualified candidates to be third line centers, and fourth line center I think is going to be taken care of, whether it's Kostelic, whether it's Beecher, whoever it is. So I think center-wise, they're fine. I think Lindholm is the perfect acquisition for the guys that were available. Is he the flashiest guy, like you said? No, but I think he was the best option they had, and they secured it and brought him in. And really, because in some ways his game is Bergeron-esque, I think he might have been the ideal solution to bring in, because they wanted and needed.
I think he's the ideal solution.
They wanted and needed a presence like that.
Unless Sidney Crosby was available, this is to me is the right kind of player for them right now.
Correct. And as far as the low ride thing goes, I think it creates the best possible development path for low ride, and the most sensible and most likely to succeed development path if he's on the third pairing to start the year. But he's going to get his minutes because he's going to be on the power play. He will definitely get, to your point, 14, 15 minutes a game. He's not going to be down in the 10, 11, 12-minute range. And we all know injuries are going to happen to the back end, and he is going to play more when that happens, and he's got the ability to, and we've already seen it. And it wouldn't shock me at all if by the end of the year he's in a top 4 and he's playing 20 minutes a night, because he has a real breakthrough season and because he continues to just get better and better, because I think they have something in him that's very good. And I think we're going to continue to see that as he builds confidence and builds his two-way game and understands how to defend better in his own zone. But the bottom line is, like, I don't understand why anybody would be complaining about Zadorov and him coming in, because that is the exact element that Charlie McAvoy needed on his side on many occasions. It's the exact element that the Bruins needed on the back end in the playoffs. It's the exact presence that they were missing and have been missing since Zdeno Chara retired. They needed somebody that was an absolute mean SOB back there, that was going to be like a warrior around the net and make it a miserable place for the other team to go, and always have them thinking that he's lurking around ready to blast them with a big hit and ready to, throw somebody away from the front of the net and just be that, that bad dude that's hanging around the net in the defensive zone. And Zadorov will be that. Like, is he going to have times where he's looking to make a hit and maybe takes himself out of position? Maybe not as many as he did when he was younger, but it may happen. He's going to take some penalties. There are going to be some things he's going to do along the way, because nobody's a perfect player. But I think that is the exact kind of player the Bruins need. And we talked about it last year. How many times did we say this team needs a Radko Gudas type, as we were watching that team over the course of the year and going into the playoffs, that they needed somebody like that on the back end. And Zadorov is that guy. And they've got him now for a long time. And I think, there is no way, shape, or form where A, you should be complaining about that type of player, and B, wondering what the team building is all about, or having problems with the team building because they brought in a player like that. No way. Like, that is exactly what you needed.
What team building did you want?
Yeah.
The one I'm looking at, I think the first Zadorov penalty of the year is going to be the one where somebody soft dumps Charlie McAvoy's corner and sends a speedy little F1. And when Zadorov cuts over a little bit, that player's going to, instead of trying to swerve around Zadorov, is going to skate at Zadorov and then pretend to get interfered with and go flying into boards and splat and then you kind of throw a stick in the air like this. And, so that's going to be, and you know what? The Bruins have to accept that, lose a few battles to win a war. Play the game they want to play. Just keep on playing it and roll with those punches, and eventually the whistles go away.
Most definitely. But The bottom line is I don't think there should be any questioning about like the roster decision making and the roster building based on the players that they brought in on July 1, because I think it makes total sense. I think what they're doing now is they're building towards the playoffs, and they know they're going to have a good regular season team. They know they're going to be in the playoffs, and they're collecting players that are going to help them in the postseason, help them beat teams like Florida, help them play a little bit more like Florida potentially at times, but certainly play a style that's going to be more successful in the playoffs and allow them to go on a longer journey and really make teams submit to their will over a long 6-7 game playoff series. And I think that's what we're starting to see right now. And it's very clear to me what they were trying to do by bringing in all these big, strong, tough players that are fast too, and trying to create that element on a team that needed more of all of that.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but so you don't believe Don Sweeney either? I mean, he said this was about speed. They just happen to be big.
No. I don't believe it. They didn't draft a player under 6'3". They didn't. The smallest guy in their back end now is Charlie McAvoy at 6'1", 210, 215
Yeah,
pounds.
He's a big 6'1".
He's huge.
He still might be arguably the best hitter they have back there.
Yes. So, I don't buy any of that. I think this was about getting bigger across the board and, and finding players that were big and fast and hit hard, and we're not shying away from the physicality, like all that stuff, which is what you have to do if you're going to win in the playoffs. And they focused on that, which kudos to them. I think it was a great job. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Thank you, Mick. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for $100 for first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. Take the guesswork out of getting your Red Sox tickets at Fenway Park this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Mick, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Everybody else out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.